High above New York City, in a penthouse where silence reigned louder than noise, sat Richard Leonard, CEO of one of the world's largest investment empires, a man admired, feared, envied. He had everything: private jets, sprawling mansions, international acclaim, but in the stillness of his life, something precious had been irreversibly lost: peace. 3 years ago, Richard's life had turned into an endless winter when his wife, Emily, his college sweetheart and the love of his life, was killed in a horrific car crash while picking up their daughter, Ella, from a birthday party. Miraculously, Ella survived. Physically, she had only minor scratches. But emotionally, something inside her shattered beyond recognition. From that day forward, the bright, chirpy 6-year-old had gone completely mute. She wouldn't speak. Wouldn't laugh. Wouldn't even cry. Her world became grayscale. Richard spared no expense trying to fix what had broken inside her. Top child psychologists, world-renowned trauma specialists, speech therapists, sensory experts, you name it. Everyone came. Everyone left. And Ella remained silent. But more than Ella, it was Richard who was silently crumbling inside. He blamed himself, for letting Emily go out that evening, for being too consumed by board meetings, for missing too many school plays, too many goodnight stories. Now he had all the time in the world, but the moments that mattered were already gone. And the guilt was eating him alive. One bleak December morning, Richard decided to personally pick up Ella from her school, something he hadn't done in months. The cold wind stung his face as he drove, but he barely felt it, his mind heavy with thoughts of his daughter. On the way back, Ella whispered something. Not words, just a faint sound. Richard turned, stunned. She was pointing to a small, humble cafe by the roadside, her eyes wide and curious. It was a modest place called Marigold Diner. He parked the car. Inside, the cafe was warm, filled with the scent of coffee and cinnamon. The place was nearly empty. At the counter stood a young waitress in a worn-out green apron. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, and the weariness in her eyes suggested life hadn't been kind to her. But when she saw Ella, her face lit up with a gentle smile. She knelt down and asked, "Would you like a magic bird that brings back giggles?" From her pocket, she pulled out a little origami bird made of bright red paper and handed it to Ella. For the first time in years, Richard saw his daughter smile. A real smile. Tentative, unsure, but unmistakably alive. He watched in stunned silence. It was as if some long-locked door inside Ella had cracked open just slightly. And the one holding the key was a waitress. Her name was Sophie. From that day on, Richard started visiting the cafe every single afternoon after school with Ella. It wasn't about the coffee. It was about the girl who could reach his daughter in ways no expert had. In Sophie's presence, Ella began to slowly change. She started humming again, doodling, playing with crayons. Then came soft giggles, eye contact, pointing at things with joy. And eventually, one day, when Sophie served them pancakes shaped like animals, Ella blurted out her first words in nearly 3 years. "Look, Daddy, it's a bear." Tears welled in Richard's eyes right there at the table. The entire cafe paused as he hugged Ella tightly. And across the counter, Sophie quietly turned away, her own eyes filled with tears. Intrigued, Richard began to learn more about Sophie. She was 28, working double shifts, attending night classes, and living in a shared apartment with 2 other girls. Her childhood had been a series of foster homes. She never knew her parents. She had once dreamed of being a teacher, but life had other plans. She had fallen in love with the wrong man who vanished when she became pregnant. Tragically, her baby didn't survive the delivery. Since then, she had been drifting, working, surviving, but never really living. And yet, despite her sorrow, there was light in Sophie, an unexplainable warmth. She didn't try to fix Ella. She simply saw her. She listened. She played. She gave the child what no therapist ever could, love without pity, presence without judgment. Richard slowly found himself looking forward to those afternoons, not just for Ella, but for Sophie's company. Her voice was a kind of calm he had long forgotten. She spoke to him like he was just a man, not a billionaire. She didn't pretend. She didn't flatter. And her laughter, light and unfiltered, was like music in his concrete, cold world. One evening, after Sophie helped Ella make a paper lantern, Richard walked her to the subway. They talked about childhood dreams. About loss. About hope. Then Sophie turned to him and said, "You know, sometimes I think broken people understand each other better. Not because they're trying to fix each other. But because they recognize the cracks." That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He stared at his ceiling and realized something terrifying: he was falling in love. Not with a glamorous heiress or a businesswoman. But with a waitress who had helped his daughter find her voice. Weeks turned into months. Then one evening, as the snow painted the city white, Ella did something unimaginable. She called out from her room, "Daddy, can Sophie live with us?" Sophie froze. Richard turned to her, eyes wet. And without hesitation, she knelt beside Ella and whispered, "Only if you want me to be your new mommy." Ella hugged her tightly and whispered, "I already do." The very next day, Richard made an announcement no one expected: he was marrying Sophie. The media erupted. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire to wed waitress." A real-life Cinderella story. The tabloids mocked her, cruelly digging into her past. Socialites sneered. Investors doubted his sanity. But Richard stood firm. At the press conference, he simply said, "I spent years trying to heal my daughter with money. But it was love, not luxury, that brought her back. Sophie didn't come into our lives by accident. She is the miracle we didn't know we were waiting for. I'm not marrying beneath me. I'm marrying above my own soul." Their wedding was a quiet ceremony, held in the garden where Ella first planted a sunflower with Sophie. No paparazzi. No glittering gowns. Just honest vows, handwritten with trembling hands and tear-streaked smiles. Today, years later, that same penthouse echoes with laughter. Sophie now runs a foundation for orphaned girls. Ella, now a thriving 10-year-old, dances across its marble floors. And Richard? He watches them both with a heart fuller than any bank account could ever provide. Because once, in a small cafe on a cold day, a billionaire met a waitress. And together, they rewrote the definition of love, family, and healing.